What if I told you that in the 1960s, Chrysler built a car that didn't need gasoline, didn't need oil changes, and could run on almost anything, from diesel fuel to peanut oil, even tequila? A car so futuristic it looked like it belonged in a science fiction movie, yet so real, 203 American families actually drove one. And then, almost every single one of them was destroyed. This is the unbelievable story of the Chrysler Turbine Car, the car that promised to change the future, but instead became one of history's greatest what-ifs. The 1960s in America was a time of boundless optimism. The space race was in full swing, jet aircraft were redefining speed, suburbs were growing, highways were expanding, and cars were bigger, faster, shinier. Every family dreamed of a better tomorrow, and automakers were fighting to deliver it. Ford had the Mustang, GM had futuristic dream cars, and Chrysler wanted to leap beyond pistons and spark plugs. They wanted a jet-powered car for the everyday driver. The idea wasn't entirely crazy. After all, turbine engines had already revolutionized aviation. They were simpler, more durable, and could run on almost any fuel. Instead of pistons hammering up and down, turbines used spinning blades to compress air and ignite fuel in a continuous burn. For engineers, it was elegant. For car lovers, it was radical. Chrysler had been quietly experimenting with turbine cars since the 1950s, but in 1963, they decided to shock the world with something bold: the Chrysler Turbine Car. The car itself was stunning. Built by the legendary Italian coach builder Ghia, it wore a sleek bronze paint called turbine bronze. The styling was sharp and futuristic, with afterburner-inspired taillights that made it look like a rocket ready for takeoff. Under the hood sat Chrysler's A831 turbine engine, a compact jet power plant that produced 130 horsepower and a surreal 425 pound-feet of torque. It could run on kerosene, diesel, jet fuel, even vegetable oil. Chrysler engineers famously bragged that it could run on Chanel No. 5 perfume or tequila. And yes, they tested it. But Chrysler didn't just show it off at car shows. They put it into the hands of real Americans. 203 lucky families were chosen to drive the turbine car for 3 months each, in one of the boldest public tests ever attempted by a car company. Imagine being a kid in 1963 and your dad pulls into the driveway in a car that sounds like a jet fighter. People turned their heads, neighbors came running. This wasn't just a car, it was an event. For all its futuristic promises, the turbine car wasn't perfect. The most frustrating issue was throttle lag. You'd hit the gas pedal and wait 2 or 3 long seconds before the car surged forward. Fine on the highway, but dangerous at intersections. The turbine also produced a constant high-pitched whine, more jet runway than city street. Fuel economy wasn't great either, averaging around 13 miles per gallon. And while the car could burn almost any fuel, the American market was moving toward cleaner, unleaded gasoline. Emissions regulations were also tightening. The turbine suddenly looked less like the future, and more like an expensive experiment. By 1966, Chrysler ended the program, and then the most heartbreaking chapter began. Of the 55 turbine cars built, Chrysler destroyed 46. Why? Some say it was to avoid hefty import tariffs, since the bodies were built in Italy by Ghia. Others claim it was to protect Chrysler's engineering secrets. Whatever the reason, watching futuristic cars crushed into scrap metal remains one of the saddest moments in automotive history. Today, only 9 Chrysler turbine cars survive. Most are on display in museums like the Henry Ford Museum, the Smithsonian, and the Peterson Automotive Museum. A few remain in private hands. One of the most famous belongs to car collector and late-night host Jay Leno, who still drives his turbine car to this day. When it roars to life, it sounds more like an aircraft taking off than a car pulling out of a garage. So, what was the Chrysler Turbine Car really? A glimpse of the future? A failed experiment? Or a symbol of what happens when innovation meets reality? For Chrysler, it was both a triumph and a tragedy. For car enthusiasts, it's a legend. It proved that automakers once dared to dream beyond the ordinary, to imagine cars not just as machines, but as works of engineering art. And even though the turbine car never made it to production, it left behind a legacy of imagination, a reminder that sometimes the greatest cars in history aren't the ones we drove, but the ones we almost could have. Out of the 55 turbine cars Chrysler built, only 9 are known to exist today. Most of them sit quietly in museums, polished and preserved like relics from another world. When you stand in front of one, you don't just see a car, you see a dream that America once chased. Visitors lean in close, staring at its copper-colored body and futuristic curves, wondering what it must have felt like to cruise down the street in a jet-powered machine. Each survivor carries the weight of history, a whisper from the 1960s reminding us of how close we came to rewriting the rules of driving. Ask anyone who ever rode in the Chrysler Turbine Car, and they'll tell you the same thing. The sound never leaves you. It wasn't the rumble of a V8 or the chatter of pistons. It was a smooth, high-pitched whine, like a jet engine spooling up before takeoff. People would stop on sidewalks just to turn their heads, curious about the strange whoosh rolling down the street. That sound became the soul of the car, a voice unlike anything else on the road. Even decades later, those who heard it say they can still close their eyes and remember the hum of the future. Back in the early 1960s, Chrysler wasn't just thinking about one experimental car. They believed turbine engines could power everything. Imagine fleets of buses gliding through cities, long-haul trucks crossing the country with whispering turbines, even small aircraft sharing the same technology. America was living in the space age, and the turbine car was a glimpse of that rocket-fueled future. If it had succeeded, maybe highways today would be filled with the sound of jet-like whines instead of the growl of gas engines. It's one of history's great what-ifs, a door to another future that never opened. On paper, the Chrysler Turbine Car had so much promise. It could run on almost any fuel, from gasoline to kerosene to even tequila. Maintenance was simpler than traditional engines, yet behind the scenes, pressure mounted. Oil companies feared a disruption, politicians were skeptical, and American drivers, used to the throaty rumble of big V8s, weren't ready for the soft hiss of a turbine. Cost, economy, and fear all came together, sealing the car's fate. It wasn't just a machine that failed, it was an idea that powerful industries decided America wasn't ready to accept. Even though the turbine car faded from the streets, it never disappeared from American imagination. Magazines put it on covers, kids collected miniature models, and Hollywood borrowed its futuristic look. Comic book fans noticed its influence in the Batmobile, blending jet technology with automotive style. The car appeared in TV shows, films, and newsreels, always as a symbol of something ahead of its time. It became more than a car. It became a piece of pop culture, a cultural icon that whispered of futures too bold to last. Its short life only made its legend stronger. Today, collectors speak about the Chrysler Turbine Car in almost mythical terms. To own one would be like holding lightning in your garage. Rare, powerful, and priceless. The handful of cars that remain aren't for sale, locked away in museums and private collections. But if one ever reached an auction floor, experts say it could command millions. Restorers look at old turbine engines with fascination, knowing they represent one of the boldest experiments in automotive history. For enthusiasts, it's the ultimate unattainable dream, the kind of car that keeps the imagination alive long after its wheels stop turning. The Chrysler Turbine Car was never just a vehicle. It was ambition wrapped in steel. It was hope roaring through neighborhoods. It was the sound of an America unafraid to chase the future. Today, we visit them in museums, listen to their faint memories, and wonder what might have been. The car may have failed commercially, but its spirit still echoes. It reminds us that innovation takes courage, and sometimes the greatest stories are not about what succeeded, but about what dared to exist. And maybe one day, we'll hear that turbine whine on the streets again.